Like that?
Say something.
Hello? One, two, three.
I can hear you. A little bit more.
One, two, three.
Hello.
Hello? Testing. Testing.
Okay.
I didn't hear. Okay.
You're ready one in the kitchen?
Yeah.
One more. Okay. So the slides are going to be up there. You can just say, next slide, which each of these is basically is a separate slide. So, it should be fairly straightforward. Hello. You can sit right there. There's a microphone, yes. So any speaking at all has to be in a microphone, or else the people online watching are not going to hear us. So those are all microphones, yes. Yep.
And you may have to share with Martin.
And then is this?
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for braving the day out today and taking time from your busy schedules. My name is Esther Griego. I am an elder here at St. Andrew, and I'm also on the board for Family Promise. The reason why we asked you to come to this meeting is, as some of you may or may not know, is the city has withdrawn the funding for our renovation. They say now that it's going to cost us $4.2 million, and they didn't think that we had enough funds to cover that cost. And other issues, and which you will hear about during the meeting. We value your opinion, and we want your ideas when we open up for discussion in terms of what our next steps are going to be. I'd like to introduce the rest of our board members. Martin Alides at the end, Laura Coombs, who is our executive director, Michael Harlan, who is our chair, and Mary Beth Nelson, and Alexandra Paisano. And Michael, you're in the back. I couldn't see you. You're behind somebody. And Michael, do you want to sit with us up here? You sure? Michael LaPala was our outgoing chair, but he's still on the board, I think. No. Anyway, I want to go over some logistics about the building. Our bathrooms are back here. If you go either one of these doors to the left or through these back doors and to the left. We have 2 bathrooms on either side of the building. Our agenda today is going to be basically talking about our goals, current concerns, city and county support, big questions that we have and that you may have, possibilities, and then we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. And anything that we ask or discuss has to be through a mic in order, because we are streaming the meeting. A lot of people couldn't be here, but they are online. In order for them to hear everything, we need to talk through a mic. So the first item on the agenda is the goals for today. And Laura, do you want to, or Mike, you want to do it? Okay.
Yep, so next slide. That's funny. Yeah. Okay. Well, This does work. Indeed. So our primary goals for today are to come up with possible discussions of how to move Family Promise of Albuquerque forward with the input from our stakeholders, you guys. And it's to come up with a schedule for the next steps in whatever process we choose. So we are in a strange situation at the moment because of COVID and all of the crazy things that happened over the past couple of years. We are now in a position where we have to decide what we're going to do now, because things are definitely different now than they were pre-COVID, unfortunately. And so, again, that's why we brought all of you here, so that we can have your input and also have your
Ideas.
ideas, input, and acceptance of what we're going to do as an organization moving forward, because, of course, it takes all of you as volunteers and as donors. They're very important to what we do. So next slide. And I'll take this one as well. So, okay. So the most recent thing that has happened is that the initial city and the county funding was pulled from us. We had multiple meetings with various stakeholders from both the city and the county. And in fact, we just had a meeting 2 nights ago with them. And I think what it comes down to is they were unhappy with the amount of time it was taking us to do some of our parts. So like the renovations, of course, needed architectural plans, and they had to go through a whole bunch of bureaucracy in order to fulfill the large list of the city and the county and the state, all of those requirements. And those all took a very long time. And a lot of the funding had a time limit on it. And unfortunately, because of having to go back and forth to make it through all of those requirements, we ended up going over the time limit that they set, and we got one extension, and even that wasn't enough. So they ended up pulling that funding, unfortunately. And of course, when we first started this project, the estimated renovation cost was only about $1.5 million. So there was the $200,000 given by you guys, by the donors, as well as the city made up the majority of the rest. The city and the county made up the majority of the rest. And of course, with their funding gone, we are not able to go forward with the renovations as we had originally intended. And so, of course, now the big question is, what are we going to be doing? So we do have an empty building right now. The building at 1516 San Pedro, was a law office. It's 6,000-ish square feet. It has quite a few offices, and we were going to renovate it into housing, like a static housing location for the families that come through our program. And we can't do that now at this point. And so what we have been doing is housing people with, there's a parsonage associated with Montgomery Church of Christ that we've signed a lease with them for the last several years, and continue to do so. And we've been housing the families in that building, and that works, but it's also very limiting in both the size, in that we can only serve, 2, maybe 3 families at a time.
Whereas with the renovations on the San Pedro building, we were looking at being able to house at least 7, as well as there's a mortgage on that building. And so we have to find a way to cover that cost while it's not being used for housing, for the housing that we need. And so part of the problem is this staff burnout because we are in the parsonage, which is kind of a static location. A lot of churches don't want to send volunteers to stay the night there because it's a separate building. It could be quite a drive away from where they live. It's an unfamiliar location for a lot of people. So we've had, as an organization, have had to cover a lot of the overnight stays for the families that are staying there as well. And that's just leading to burnout and the inability to work as a team because we often aren't able to get the people to stay there at the same time. And so there's a lack of cohesion in the team because we're not spending a lot of time together. And all of those are just compounding on top of course, the changes that happened because of COVID. And part of that is a loss in just numbers of volunteers and congregations who are willing to help us with overnight stays, with giving food, with all sorts of stuff. And the loss of those congregations is hurting. Like I said, when we don't get volunteers, we have to fill those positions with our own people, and unfortunately, as Laura can attest to, and the several people working for her, they're getting burned out just because they have to do this several times a week, sometimes the entire week. Because we are missing the volunteers that we needed from the congregations and other places. One of the other things is a loss of the client and volunteer relationships. Because congregations have dropped out because, again, because of COVID, we're losing the connection that we had with a lot of these people, and that loss of a good relationship is hurting in a lot of ways. So that is a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with right now. Again, a lot of it can be attributed to COVID, but we're 4 years on, 3 years from the worst of that, and it's still biting us, and we have to find a way to move forward as we are right now. So next slide. Now, Laura, did you want to cover this?
I think Alex is going to start with it, and I'll follow up. Just leave on the file.
Yeah. Oh. Really? Is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can actually, I'm fine with it. So, as you know, we got allocated $1.5 million for the renovations due to the processes, everything, the funding was pulled. We still have the support of Tammy Feeblecorn and Adrian Barboa. I knew I was going to do that. As our county commissioner. Commissioner Barboa still has the $500,000 that was set aside for Family Promise. And she has some really great ideas about what she would like to do with that $500,000 to help us. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it here today. And so she is online with us. One of the big factors is that it will just take a lot more time than we had ever initially thought. I don't want to say this wrong, but I'm going to try and say what she stated at the meeting we had the other night. And that was that she would like to use the $500,000 that is set aside to hire an architect to do preliminary drawings for the site. We cannot use the previous drawings because they were done pro bono. And if we're going to get government funding, we can't do that, which I'm going to make a little segue because this is a volunteer organization, and so I really and truly love the idea of volunteers working to do it, but that's my own. So they were going to hire a architect to complete the preliminary drawings. Okay. That's okay. The preliminary drawings, and then that would give us what it would cost. Both Commissioner Barboa and City Council Feeble-Corn want to help us find the money that we will need to renovate the building, whether that be $4.4 million or a little bit more or a little bit less. They both said that they were dedicated to it. As a matter of fact, Councilor Feeble-Corn said that she wants Family Promise in her district, and she wants it to happen. So they are willing to help us support this funding. The problem with this funding is that, and this is where I don't quite understand, and we might need to have Commissioner Barboa step in. They need to give the funding to the city in order for us to use it. And that is where the confusion for me lies. But that the city, it's going to take about a year for the county and the city to get this plan in motion. So that is a year to just get the preliminary drawings done to find out how much it's going to cost. And then, after the cost is figured out, we will attempt to get funding from any of the government sources that we can. It might possibly be capital outlay. It could be from city, it could be from county, it could be from state, it could be from federal. But they are dedicated to us having Family Promise static site shelter come to fruition, and Tammy Feeble-Corn wants to ensure that it is in her district. So, the place we have. I'll talk on that. This is the cost of renovations. Next slide, sorry. This is the cost of renovations that the county came up with. And so it was a $2.6 million shortfall with the funding that they were giving us. So the construction estimate, it's a 6,400 square foot building at $500 a square foot, was $3,200,000. The gross receipt tax at 7.75 is $248,000. Design services are $224,000. Soft costs, which include special inspections, utilities, IT, and permits, was $320,000. and the owner contingency, which is 5%, was $224,000. Yes, I can.
Thank you, Laura. I've been handed or given the assignment of helping facilitate a discussion about the big question. So next slide, please. I'm not sure why they gave me the big question, since I'm the smallest person in the panel here. And most important announcement is the Lobo game is 47-42 right now. So San Diego State is behind. It's just after the start of the second half. So that's good news for us. Big questions are the elephants in the room. I mean, and this is audience participation time. So this is where we need feedback, ideas. I can come out and hand the mic to anybody who's interested, or you feel free to come up here.
This mic up here at the front is also on, so if you could come up to speak at that mic.
So
That'd be
again, we
good.
have elephants in the room here, concerns and issues about what has just been brought up. First, from a fiscal standpoint, does it make sense? Do we really want to spend $4 million, $4.5 million on a building that we paid $500,000 for? There should be a lot of opinions about that, I would guess. And by all means, we'll welcome any feedback on this.
So when they say that the architect has to be paid, I know I am good friends with an architect who she owns Designs Plus, and do they have to be paid a certain amount of money, or can they do the job at a low cost?
So, sorry. Woo. So they do have to be paid. I have been told that they can be paid and then they can donate back to Family Promise, whatever they're paid, but they have to be paid. They also have to be procured through government standards, and that is normal. The person that we had doing the drawings had 40 years of experience and was an amazing architect. I just feel that because he was not procured through their process, he was not acceptable.
Sorry.
So what exactly are their standards? Because, I mean, she's been in business for a long time. She's also got connections with A Brand New Day, where she's worked to facilitate city relationships. So she's interested in helping, but she'd like a little more confidence in the organization.
So they have to be bonded, they have to be not on the federal blacklist, essentially. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they cannot be federally, have lost licensure or lost contracts that due to any misconduct or, yeah.
So, but how are they found? Like, do they apply?
We will have to put a bid out,
Okay, and then they just need to bid.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, Laura, I have the commissioner on the phone. Now, I will have to put her on the mic if we have some questions for her.
So again, the question that is on the table right now is, does it make fiscal sense? Does it make any sense to spend that kind of money on a modest facility that we've got a mortgage on? Anybody have any concerns, ideas about that? Any feedback that you'd like to share?
Just a couple of questions about the learnings from what has happened already. The lack of a person to project manage this is tremendous, and the opportunity for the mayor's office and the county to have a win-win out of this, I think, got a little lost in there are 3 other people in agencies in the county and the city that are responsible for homeless activity, and nobody seemed to liaison with the planning department or you folks to help in this. aside from there wasn't, the ability to have a project manager to manage all these things before the big hiccups started happening. So I would hope that somehow if we move forward with some other project, that crucial issue gets addressed.
So that is one of the conditions of us getting future funding from the city and county. Their conditions are that we have a project manager for the project, that we hire an architect. My mind is not pulling them up, I'm sorry. There was a grants manager, and one other thing, and I can't remember. Yeah, the architect. But there were those four. Oh, and we do raise some of the funds ourselves.
I think your point is extremely valid, is, we need to learn from what has happened. I think the board and, airing dirty laundry here, I speak for myself, not the others, went into this somewhat naively. We were given assurances by the city that they would help us through this process and hold our hands. I think we probably relied on that too much. And when the time came to take advantage of that offer, it wasn't there. And some administration changes, new appointments with the mayor, new focus on maybe more of a public view of the housing issues and crisis. One of the individuals that's come in and kind of helped point us in a different direction was a new appointee by the mayor, and has a focus in a certain way that maybe was different than what it was a year and a half ago when we started this process. So we are learning from it. The challenge is that, there's a lot of cost involved in doing this differently than what we had planned on doing it. Hiring all of those positions is just not something we ever considered or budgeted for or have the ability to do. We have to change our focus on that now. So, yes.
If you would not go forth with the 4 million to put in, what would be an alternative plan then? Is there something on the board?
We hope you're here to help us with. She has talked another slide in a moment or two about possibilities. So, but at this point, we're open to ideas.
So I hear what we're talking about here, and I'm thinking we used to house these people in the basement of churches very inexpensively, and then we went to this idea, and it's a lot of money for 7 families. So we went from, the way I see it is, from over here to over here, and it seems like there might be something in
Really quickly, does anybody have any questions for Commissioner Barboa? She is on the phone, and if anybody has questions, she will answer them.
Would there be any catches, having been in
think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, we don't control any of the programming. We wouldn't, this is just a capital, exchange of resources. We're not, you all run the program. That's what we like and prefer because you all are running the program with your expertise. You decide your boundaries, how you run your program, and we can.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
Oh, thank you. So would there be a very specific outline of requirements that we must meet to make sure this fallout doesn't happen? I think it just needs to be so clear. So if is that possible?
I think I heard it, but could you repeat the question just so I'm sure?
So I'm asking for a very complete outline of expectations that need to be met in order for the funding to stay in place so we can move forward.
Thank you so much. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to say hello to everybody and sorry I couldn't be there in person. Second is to that question. Run nonprofits, and I know that seems outrageous to me. You know, it seems outrageous, the cost, what you have to do to be able to get government funding. It's really set up so only big developers can access the breaks, right? It really is set up like that. So what I wanted to make sure to do is to say, since this, and Councilor Feeblecorn is committed to also, is that this 500,000, and they estimated, our experts that were in the room estimated it would cost just about 300,000 to get all of the things in place. What they called it is design to 30%. So like, I guess that means architecture and whatever other else developing things that are needed to get everything to code and have the design ready to up to 30%. And then that's when you're able to ask for capital outlay funds to do the actual renovations you're talking about. And that's what the estimate 4 million is. So with this 500,000 that the county and I had committed through the county's funds is to get you all to that place where whether it's our funding or other state funding, that you're ready for it, that you have all the designs and procurement and architectural, how they want it because they're government, you know, that all of that is ready for you guys for any kind of government funding you might seek out. But also Councilor Feeblecorn and myself have committed, because we know how important this is, to help seek for that funding through those other avenues, through the state legislature, through our own city and county funding, as well as I wanted to just to hopefully reassure folks is the governor has committed and about 500 million to housing. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities to seek government funding for your project and maybe even other projects. But for now, that 500,000 up to that amount, we want to use to get your project ready to go. And I understand it sounds outrageous that when they showed me the 4 million, I said, can't we buy 3 mansions with that amount? But that, you know, they're saying that this is the mode of construction, supplies, materials, getting the building up to code. So I'm sorry that we're in this place, but I'm hoping that that 500,000 can help get you guys to the place ready so that you don't have to fundraise for that. and then we can seek out the funding. And like I said, Councilor Feeblecorn and myself are committed to seeking out that funding to get the funding you need for the renovations.
We have a couple more questions.
She has a follow-up here, I think.
Sorry, oh, go ahead, go ahead. Oh, so thank you so much. What I want to know also is if this group decides maybe to change the property that might be used, because I understand, for instance, the fire suppression system that's required is over $22,000 in and of itself. So even if the facility would change, would that have to then restart all of the functions that we're talking about here today that you're talking about with us in terms of funding? Or could we apply that?
For me, I do believe, I believe either way you're ready. So that 500,000 that I have is to get a project ready. If this place that the family promise that we're currently talking about isn't the property you're talking about, then let's quickly move to decide what property you are talking about, so that money could be spent to get that project ready. But, and then get a real, basically we are sort of starting at zero. So yes, you can decide if it's that property or what property, but that on any property, we're sort of starting at zero, getting it ready to design, and then there's a commitment to move forward to seek funding. For me, wherever it's at in the city or county, I'm committed to helping. I know for Councilor Feeblecorn, she said that, you know, she wants it in her district. I don't know if it would change her mind about how much she worked to get money for it if it wasn't in her district. I can't answer that for her, but she did say many times that she's excited to have it in her district. For me, I'll fight for the money wherever the property is.
And I think we have one more question, two more questions.
I don't know that this is for the commissioner, but I would like to know for the property, what were the criteria for how this property was chosen, that location, because of transportation for the people who would be living there, you know, those kind of things. And
So I can address that real quick. So there were lots of reasons why that location was chosen. One is we looked at lots of properties and we found out that in order to have a shelter, all of the rooms that the people in the shelter will be staying in have to be on the outer part of the building because they have to have egress windows in order to get out if there's any problem. And so this building was ideal. It was also chosen because it is close to public transportation and close to places where families could secure employment. One more question, Adrian.
Was the zoning change ever an issue at the current site?
I can address this one as well. There was not, it was not. I'm thinking you mean zoning of the building to be used for, it is MXL, and so it can be used for a, as a dormitory or as a place to house families.
Not to be a stick in the mud, but you had a competent architect do it, but they didn't cross their T's and dot their I's as far as being okay with the government. Is there any way to take that competently made plan and get the other architect to do it? Why are we recreating the wheel? When the wheel was invented, it just wasn't by the correct person, but it's correctly done. Is there any way for the proper person to use anything that's already been done instead of starting with, okay, let's look at this room,
I can cover that if, or,
Yes,
so, yeah, so, well, and I don't, this isn't my expertise, but, Elise Archuleta, who is our Deputy Director of, Public Works, he's an engineer. The way he explained it to us yesterday was that, or on Thursday, was that, architects are like owners of that design. So if anybody, you can't pick it up, and like a new engineer can't come and pick up that architectural, or a new architect can't come and pick up and make changes to it, because it's like their, it's their work. And so if they make changes to it, then it has to be the person that owns it, because they're accountable to it. So if something went wrong, or that was part of the problem that the guy said, it wasn't that the design was fine as far as, the architecture wasn't necessarily in the wrong. It was that they need somebody that can go through the whole project, that they could rely on. So they say, like, he used the example that midway through the project, let's say they take down a wall and there's another problem there, they need to be able to work with that architect to answer questions about the structure, and they need to be able to rely on that relationship. And they said same question was asked last night, and they said that legally, another architect can't pick up another architect's design and work off of that. They have to stay consistent to their work, because they're accountable to it.
What's the possibility of qualifying the pro bono architect?
I mean, this was where we sort of went round and roundabout. I understand the desire. Obviously, government moves at a different pace and different requirements. So they were pretty clear that, the problem with pro bono is having that consistency through the contract, having somebody that they could call on at any time. And then they mentioned the other parts about that I heard you all discuss about, like, sort of the manager of the project. And so everybody has to be in relationship to each other, be able to get a hold of each other until completion. So, I mean, they pretty much said it, they really shy away from a pro bono because of those reasons, unless, I guess there could be some agreement made, but they were pretty much saying that. And that's where I'm saying, I understand, I don't want, that it's not fair that you all have to also do those extra costs. So that's why I reserved that 500 and didn't just take it away all the way, was that hopefully you could have the funds needed in that to get ready, to get the architect that's through the procurement, that the federal funds are going to accept, that,
What would be the possibility of qualifying the pro bono and hiring that person if they want to give back their fee to the organization? Well, that's up to them. But why could we not qualify them and hire them?
So we have a list, and I think the city has a similar list of, like, architects that they've vetted and gone through, because they know that they're meeting the federal requirements, that they make the state and local requirements. That's what I was told. I am far from an engineer or anyone that knows how to do any of this any more than you. But I guess if there was somebody that had that same level and that was willing to do pro bono for you, or to be hired on a whatever contract, that's something we'd have to talk to the experts about. I don't know that answer. They really made it sound, and that's why I committed the 500, because it's expensive to do all the things they want to do. They're saying you need, in order to just even be ready for renovations, it's really expensive, and they estimated about 300,000 just to get ready. So I'm saying that's why I'm committing that funding, so that you can hopefully have the opportunity to just even get ready enough to accept government funding for the renovations you need.
Those are all
No.
great questions. Go ahead, Esther.
My question for the commissioner is, the 500,000 that you said you would give to the city, is that protocol? Is it something that the county could manage for us?
Well, and so when we met about this internally, I was told that, so there's this thing at the state level called the anti-donation clause. It's an old statute in the state's books that says government can't give money to nonprofits, and it was supposed to, keep government from giving money to their friends or their favorite projects. But what it's meant is that in these kind of instances, when we want to give 500,000 to Family Promise to get an architect, it looks like we're giving you money, and it's in violation of the anti-donation clause. So years ago, the state passed a statute that government could accept on called the Affordable Housing Act. I was told that we didn't have an affordable housing ordinance at the county. And that was why, Esther, in that meeting, we talked about moving that money to the city, because they do have an Affordable Housing Act, and they can, without problem, spend that money on your architect and all the things you need to get ready. Since our meeting, I did find out that we do have the ordinance, but I just want to make sure, so I will do the work to see if we can, if it's possible to keep it at the county, then we will. But that was the reason, was because then it would have to go out for RFP. If we didn't have that housing authority ordinance at the county, and we wanted to keep being the ones managing the project, it would mean that we would have to put it up for RFP and do all these other steps, so that it didn't look like we were just picking and choosing whoever we wanted to give money to. So it might be possible, but either way, I think Councilpeople Corn is in your corner, I'm in your corner, and we both want to contribute to getting this done.
Well, let's get back to the big questions here, and jump in at any time if you do have questions for the commissioner, and I'm sure she can answer those. I will answer the question, the first question on behalf of the board. The board is very concerned about a project that would be this much, and there's a lot of questions about, is that viable? Is that even possible? So, the compromises, one that was thrown out already, seem like much more likely solutions for us. Spending that much money on a building for this size of a project is probably unreasonable. Go ahead.
My question is, would it be feasible to sell this property and, as you go along, purchase another one that won't cost $500,000?
I think that's a very good possibility. I mean, that's what we're here for today, is to hear these ideas. That is something the board has already very informally discussed and talked about and put on our list of items to think about. But if this building can't be renovated for less than $4 million, then that precludes us from going any further with this building. It just doesn't make sense to go any further on that.
If we were to sell the building, has anybody looked into what its current value is and what the market is like? And is that a feasible possibility? Because, follow-up question, how are we doing on fundraising for day-to-day operations?
I will say that we have not looked into the cost or the value of the current building compared to our mortgage that we hold. We do have an interest-only mortgage, meaning that we have not paid any principal. So our mortgage is the full cost of what we borrowed. Based on real estate trends in Albuquerque, I think one could assume that it's a greater value than what our mortgage is, but we have not done any homework on that. And The second question you had, I forgot what that was, I'm sorry.
Day-to-day operating.
Day-to-day operating funds over the course of the last year, which is common to most nonprofits, has gone down. We have actually tapped into earlier this last calendar year a line of credit in order to make sure that we were able to pay for all our obligations. Thankfully, that was a one-time issue, and we, at this point, are comfortable with what's coming in, but it's certainly nowhere where it was a year ago or 2 years ago.
So I agree with Kathy here that the possibility of selling the building that you purchased, and then either finding property that you could build a new building on, because I think you could build it a lot less than $4 million, and maybe not build it so big, but as time goes on, you could make it so you could add more rooms. I'm even wondering, the property where it's being housed right now, if that's a possibility, if they would, to build a building there, even tear that one down. I know it's expensive to tear down, but that's something I think could be looked into and
Thank you.
build there.
Those are great suggestions that we will all put on the list that we need the input from you all to move forward with. We'll move to the second big question. If we do have this gap of a year or so, is there any ideas out there that you would like to share about what do we do with the building in the meantime? It's actually vacant. Ideas have been thrown out to try and lease it, to try and sublease it. There are smaller, for those of you who haven't been there, smaller offices. When we bought the building, there was, I think, a masseuse in one of the corners, or a yoga instructor or something. So small individual businesses had rented an individual office in that location. So that's a possibility too. The building's currently not set up for that, but anyway, any ideas, any suggestions, any thoughts come to mind on that? And you're going to get the prize for best contributor today.
Would there be any revenue value in renting out those? And would we have to pursue renovations to get it ready to be able to do that?
So there are a few things that do need fixed on the building. Unfortunately, while we were out of the building, somebody pulled the wiring from the back of the building for the addition of the building. We did report it to insurance, and they paid us the estimate above our deductible, which is $1,000. So that will be getting fixed. The heating is having difficulties, but we will have someone come in and look at that. And then, no, there will not need to be any additional renovations, just current repairs.
If you were looking to lease, possibly as an executive suite, where you've got a secretary or administrative assistant is available for whoever rents it out, just a thought out there. Y'all said it was a law office prior to that. Maybe there are some law students at UNM Law that would like a place to begin. You just don't know, so.
Great, thank you.
I'm thinking if you lease it out, that becomes an administrative job for somebody, managing those leases and dealing with their issues and all that. Do you want to do that on top of what you're already busy with?
Being a landlord becomes a challenge, yes. There's also some probably permitting and maybe zoning issues that go into all of that. So all of these are ideas that need to be, sorted out and vetted. But again, that's what we're here for today, to hear your feedback. So we'll move on to the third big question, which is less fiscal oriented and more organizationally oriented. You heard Michael talk earlier about the volunteers losing connection with the program over time. COVID set kind of the benchmark for that to happen. But when we moved to a single site, a lot of volunteers were less likely to drive across town and bring dinner and sit with the guests, understandably because of distance and time and rush hour and those kinds of things. And just over the last year and a half or 2 years, the volunteer connection has unfortunately degraded, and we don't want to lose track of that while we're thinking about all this other fiscal stuff, which is, obviously problems in itself. But without volunteers and without that connection to the program, there's no reason to think about all those other things. So does anybody have any suggestions or ideas about how we can best connect the volunteers back to the program, get the volunteers engaged again and passionate about what the program is about?
So one of my questions is, how have the clients benefited from being at a static site? Because I assume that there's a benefit, there's a reason for doing this.
The benefit is the stability for the children. That is the biggest benefit. This is not a benefit, but this is one of the things that causes a bit of staff burnout, and it's that the families get kind of comfortable. And I don't mean that, I believe that the families should be comfortable, but get comfortable in the sense that it's their space and it should be their space. It's kind of a complicated mess. It should be their space, but it should be our space. And so one of the major problems right now is we can't rate it on how many have graduated because of the housing crisis, because of the lack of affordable housing, the lack of vouchers, the lack of those things. And so, but are our families growing? Yes. And they continue to grow. I don't know that I'm the one to address the difference in it because I see it very similar, but the thing that is missing is that relationship with each of the volunteers. When they came to your house, they built relationships with you guys individually. And we have a couple of congregations that are trying to do creative things. And I think that's what made Family Promise unique. I know I'm not directly answering your question, but I think that connection is what made Family Promise unique. And I feel like it's something that has been missing with the families, partially too, because it's their space. They eat, they go upstairs. We need to figure that all out and have it be more concise. But we're also later on going to discuss some possibilities for the re-engagement. But have they been successful? Yeah. I think that's partially because of the dedication of my staff to them succeeding and to seeing them grow. And it's always been the little things that aren't necessarily seen, like somebody finally being able to, being so painfully shy that they can't even speak, to the point that they'll speak to volunteers that come in. So growth has changed a bit too. But I do know that they have gotten a little too comfortable.
Okay. Second question, if we just dissolved the idea of the building and went back to what we were doing pre-COVID, would that work?
Well, we can probably go to the next slide on the basis of that question. Actually, 2 slides, if we could go 2 slides. So, another slide. Yeah.
So you talked about wanting more connection between the volunteers and their clients. Have they given any feedback as to what they would like all of us to do and what they would like that to look like?
So because they didn't experience previously, no. I know we have talked to people we did have a family who had been in previously and came in to programs since we were at a static site, and they did state that they really preferred the stability of being in the same place, but that they did miss interacting with the volunteers. So.
And they didn't have any thoughts as to what, I mean, I'd love to be able to do a better job.
So
in what
some
that
of
could
them,
look like.
so they stated that they really liked when they did crafts on Saturday, or sometimes when they did outings, sometimes they were too tired, so it's, but they did enjoy
So maybe
those
it's
types of
bringing
things.
some of those times back in instead of just meals.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to add something to the last question, the previous question, which is the decision to go to a single site was a default decision because of COVID. It wasn't something that it was one or the other. It was we had to do that, and then we have adapted over time because of that change. So it wasn't as if we thought it would be better for the guests or worse for the guests. It was a necessity that had to be made.
I'm going to speak just to why I really feel strongly we should stay at one site. So if they miss those connections, why can't they still have those connections? I mean, if they have people who come in and are the evening hosts, we could do things like that. I mean, I don't see any difference. And I was with Ann down at First Pres, and I would say the majority of families still went to the rooms afterwards. It wasn't any different. And I've never in my life had to move each week. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Getting your sack together and moving. Your children, we try to keep them in the same school. They have to figure out, well, where we are, how we're going to get them if they're doing their own driving. I would really fight against that. I would. I think it would just be terrible to go back to that. That's my
Not only that, I am also against going to the old way of taking care of these families. The transportation of going from church to church, some of you were involved in moving those beds. It is a chore. And I don't know that, congregations are getting any younger to be able to do that.
So I've been against, although it was easy to emotionally tug at people when we had to explain the hardship of moving once a week but even before, and I hate to report this because it's not how I'd like things to be, but even before the pandemic, I was struggling to get volunteers that would be willing to do nights, and as a coordinator, I have frequently had to do all of the nights myself. And as things are different, and some of our congregation is beginning to age, and I can't get a single evening host. So if we were to go to one of these possibilities, A, B, or C, I don't feel confident in my ability to complete a week as a host. I don't feel confident in being able to get people during the day, during the overnights. If I couldn't do it before the pandemic, and now it's even worse with everybody saying, oh, I can't help, I'll provide a meal, but I can't help. What are we gonna do if we go through the year and you continue with the staff burnout and we continue having a lowering volunteer base? Because my volunteer base is very low. So I'm looking at these options and I'm going, so I have to take an entire week from work to be able to cover shifts?
So I want to say that these aren't all the options. These were options that came up that brainstorming possible possibilities. But we want your input on this as well. And so these were just ones that came up. We do have to figure out something. We doubled our cost because we have to have overnight hosts paid. We need to figure out something. It is not what is best for the organization. The way that we are going right now is not what is best for the organization. And so we need to figure that out.
Okay, what I was hearing a few minutes ago was that people that are living in other parts of the city are having trouble coming and helping out on this side of the city. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Moving it into churches like ours, we have no facilities, no place, no space, no showers, and I'm sure we're not the only church in the city in that condition. What if, as a possibility, there's a house on this side, there's a house on the other side, or in another part of the city? So it's more accessible. You still get 6 to 7 families, depending on the size of the houses. Little to no renovation would be necessary. Just a thought. And then you've got relationships being built in that community of those churches. So, yeah, I'm just full of ideas today.
Well, and actually, those are good thoughts. Those are thoughts that are possibly possibilities. But then that splits our rotation.
It does.
And so then we have to come up with probably another 10 to 15 churches or congregations to help cover the split. And so I don't want to come off negative in any type. I want to listen to all of the possibilities because I feel stuck and I don't want to feel that way anymore. And I want what's best for Family Promise as an organization.
I think those are brilliant, creative ways of thinking that we need to start taking into account.
This is maybe a dumb question I don't want to ask in front of everybody, but I am
No
going to.
question
in
is
case anybody
dumb.
is also thinking the same thing. When we make these changes, when will they take effect? Because we have a week coming up in just a couple of weeks and we haven't.
No.
Is there any official rotation at this point?
There is, the official rotation is you bringing meals right now. It will not happen tomorrow. It's going to be a process. We aren't going to say, oh, you have to have overnight hosts this week.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
So right now,
I
it's
won't do that.
exclusively meals
Yes.
for the rotation, because
Yes.
like this week is when I would usually be promoting for our church, so it's just exclusively meals.
Yes.
At this point,
Yes.
okay.
Meals and supplies, yes.
How much notice will we have? I mean, obviously we all have to work together to figure out what's going on, but
It's definitely going to be a process, and actually, in the middle of the night, last night, I was thinking about this question,
Yeah, 'cause
trying to decide if there was a timeline that I could even give. I'm not going to say we're doing this next month. I'm not going to say we're doing this in 2 months.
feels like everything is up in the air.
It is, and it's a very
That's
hard
kind of what I
place to be.
reported to leadership council,
Yeah.
and then afterwards I was like, well, we did sign up for weeks, but we don't know how those, we don't,
Yeah,
so.
and that is what it's going to be for right now. And we do understand that there are some congregations that will, whatever decision we come up with, there are some congregations, just like it has happened with the static site, we've lost 5 congregations. We're going to, no matter what decision we make, we're going to find that some congregations are unable to do it. And that's tragic, but I understand completely. I understand that your congregations are aging. I understand that your congregations have other obligations.
Are we seeking other congregations, actively?
Yes, well, not actively, because we've been pretty focused on this.
Right.
We will be recruiting congregations in the
Everybody's got to
year
start
coming.
trying to find their friend with a church and say, hey, do you guys want to help out? Because honestly, I think the more churches we have helping us, the more likely this isn't going to completely collapse out from under our feet. We need more. We need a lot more resources than the people in this room. I don't know how many people are streaming, but we need way more community help.
Agreed.
So did you say you've lost 5 churches?
Yes.
Are they churches that are far away from where the local,
One of the congregations that we lost because they are on the west side and their congregants do not feel comfortable driving over.
Right.
One of the congregations we lost because they had only, their congregation had a mass exodus. Another congregation we lost because they wanted to do rotation. And
what do you mean by rotation?
they wanted to do the hosting in their congregation.
Oh, I see, okay.
And the 2 other ones I cannot remember right now.
But you only lost one that was on the other side of the river. Because, downtown is, I think, a very middle place. I mean, it's easy to get downtown from either side of the river. So that would, but if you only lost one because of the location, I don't know.
But we have lost a lot of volunteers who cannot drive at night.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true.
So,
Yeah, I know what we did is when we went to church council, we were saying, oh, we need to help the homeless. So that's how we got up to 6 weeks instead of 4 weeks. But can we, and I know it's still an issue with older and driving at night, is there any way we can add an hour so the staff gets, I know we're just 5 to 7, like we start tomorrow. And is there any way we can do 5 to 8 so the staff can have at least 1 extra hour every night? Will that help you guys to have, okay, well, you're rushing around, you've got to be back by 7. What if you're back by 8? I mean, I'm just trying, I'm a nurse. People need a break. And is there any way, and then on Saturdays, can we do something to do more with the families on Saturdays so you guys can have a break? So, I mean, luckily, we're only a mile from there. We're just down Louisiana. So we can, a lot of the people at St. John's can help and would be willing to do, they love doing the Saturday thing. Can we set up crafts or other things? I know right now we only have 1 child. But, is that something that we can work into? If, as the people are able, can we, that those churches that are able to, give you guys more time off?
the answer to that is yes, but the logistics behind it are tough because some congregations will say, yes, we can do Saturday, and some will say, no, there's no way that we can do Saturday. And so then my staff has to be on call for whether the congregation's going to do it or not. So we have to have buy-in. So the possibilities that I have listed up here, like I said, are just possibilities. We want your possibilities too, and I appreciate the input that has been given because there's a lot of really good input. So, yes.
I just wanted to support the fact that they really do like not moving. At our church, we have a school, so we used to do 2 weeks back to back in the summertime, and the families just loved it. They were like, oh, it's so nice not to have to move. It's so nice. Everyone liked it. And we do have showers, but, and we had to wash their sheets in between because we don't have washers, but it worked out great. But I can understand that people do not want to drive. Because I've lost volunteers that used to cover a lot of evenings. So I get it. It's hard. It's just a hard thing. My vote is static. So I think that's the better.
So like I said, these are just the possibilities that we came up with. If anybody can't see the screen, because I know the print's kind of small, possibility A was shelter continues at Montgomery Church of Christ with congregations covering meals and weekends. That would be Friday evening to Monday morning. Possibility B, shelter continues at Montgomery Church of Christ with congregations covering meals and all overnights. Possibility C, shelter continues at Montgomery Church of Christ with congregations covering meals, weekend days, and 4 overnights a week. Shelter returns to congregational rotation. In addition, one of the ones that I thought of but didn't put on here because I thought 4 was enough, even though it's small, was shelter continues at MCOC with congregations covering meals and weekend days. So those were just possibilities. We want the input from you, and we've gotten a lot of input from you in regards to it. I understand the idea that you may not have volunteers. The other possibility is that we get more congregations on and we double up the congregations so that it's 2 congregations at a time. Logistically, it is, and we've done that with a couple of congregations that have doubled up with another congregation, and logistically it works out well to have 2 congregations covering, but that means, again, we need to add several congregations.
I love the idea of doubling up congregations because there might be some smaller congregations who are not financially able to provide meals, whereas, like, for instance, I'm from Sandia Presbyterian. We are amazing at getting those meals, but we cannot, we just don't have a church with all of the people old enough to sleep in a strange bed are managing families. And the rest of them can't drive at night or can't handle an overnight in a strange place. So overnights are like, those are really, really difficult. So if I had to vote for any one of these possibilities, it would be which was the one with...
The one that's not up there?
Yeah, the one that's not up there. There we go. The one that's not up there. Because I do think that we could, and one thing that I know that the last time the missions team discussed Family Promise, we had a lot of people who felt that they were concerned that there's not a ministry opportunity with the organization, and that really kind of killed the morale for Family Promise and on our team specifically, not necessarily the whole congregation. But there's a concern on the team that there's not a ministry opportunity. So if we were to take advantage of them on Sundays, we would be able to bus them to a different church service each week, right? And I don't know if the other congregations agree. They want that ministry opportunity.
So we are not allowed to make the families go to any services because that is their free will.
I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. God's gift of free will is the best gift of all.
We wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. We do offer to them that they are allowed to attend, but we cannot make it mandatory.
Well, yeah, we definitely don't want to make it mandatory, but are they taking advantage of the opportunity? Is it something they seek sometimes?
Yeah.
Because I know they do the Wednesday night fellowships at the NCC.
Some of them do.
Some of them do, okay.
Yes.
So there's still an opportunity to minister in some ways, right? It's just a matter of whether or not they accept it. Just pretty typical for ministry in general.
So can we go back to the previous slides? This was possibilities for the building, and I left off selling the building, but that, of course, is a possibility. The possibility A was to utilize the front and back are separated by doors, utilize that and utilize the front of the building as a day center, during the day and rent out the back offices to other professionals. Again, both of these will be headaches for whoever does it, probably me and Martin, because Martin's our treasurer. So the money would go to Martin. And then possibility B would be to utilize the doors and use the front as a day center and possibly get licensure to open a thrift store run by volunteers similar to Thrift Smart, the Silver Horizons thrift store that's only open a couple days a week. Also modeled after Safe House thrift store where the families would be able to shop for free. And possible training ground for interested families, but it would have to be run by volunteers, and that would be another way to have volunteer engagement. And then possibility C would be selling the building, and I did have a bunch of options for selling the building and taking the loss if it's a loss, selling the building and using the monies to find another possible place, selling the building and using it for operational and going back to a rotation type. I love the idea of the possibility of houses. One of the issues is we need to make sure if we decide we're going to purchase something that it is sound. With all respect to, this is hard for me to say, with all respect to Montgomery Church of Christ, we love being there, but there are a lot of maintenance issues in that house that cause us to struggle a bit. And so that is an issue.
So you might kill me for this one, Laura, but would Montgomery Church be willing to sell that parish house and money could go into refurbishing that to make it a more acceptable, or would just moving to a new place be better?
Depends. Money speaks.
I think I heard a bunch of comments. Somebody said it would have to be rezoned, which I believe is true. Again, all respect to Montgomery Church of Christ, and they're allowing us to use the building, do not feel like purchasing that property would be in Family Promise's best interest.
Okay, so if you could go forward a couple slides to the one that says summary up at the top. One more. One more slide. That one, yes. And Mary Beth.
That's me.
Now you get to use the microphone.
Now I get to use the microphone. I don't know.
That's what it was for.
Well,
You can clip it on it.
Well, no, I don't care about clipping it to me. Okay, what we say is that what we are doing currently, we did because of COVID descending upon us unannounced. We scrambled to be able to continue to serve the clients that we have. It still is not ideal. We need to come up with different solutions, and that's what we're here for, is to see what ideas people might have. I have something that was not brought up that I'm going to bring up right now, whether you like it or not. We talk about recruiting more congregations, and I agree that that is essential. We need to have more participation. But I think we could also think about reaching out to benevolent organizations in the community that are not churches or synagogues. There are charitable or benevolent organizations such as Rotary and Elks and I don't even know what else. But it seems to me that we could try to get them to join Family Promise. So I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but that is at least a suggestion on my part. We've come up with a whole bunch of solutions. Whatever we do will not happen overnight. It will have to be a process, but we need to move forward and try to resolve the difficulties that we are facing. I would say I thank everybody for coming and for sharing their ideas, and we will do our best as a board to address the problems that Family Promise is facing. I'm done. Michael?
All right. Thank you. And that is all that we had officially. Does anyone else on this board have anything else they want to add? Anything?
Here comes
I've been sitting in the
trouble.
peanut gallery. Thank you to St. Andrews for hosting us. And thank you, Esther, for helping set this up. And thank you, everybody, for coming. We will get there. That's it.
And thank you to the board, because it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate it.
I want to say one last thing, that Councilwoman Feeble-Corn and Commissioner Balboa are not the only ones in this. Debbie O'Malley, who is not a commissioner anymore, and she has a tremendously long title. She's working for the city, but she was at the meeting with us a couple of nights.
She's the Associate Chief of Staff for Policy.
Thank you, she wrote it down. And she is also very much in, support of Family Promise. She was initially the person I contacted for the money, and she said, Esther, this is the kind of project I like to work on. I said, yes, that's why I called you. So it's the three of them working together, and let's hope that, we can make this work.
All right, thank you. And thank all of you for coming. That's it.
Yeah. Just don't trip.
Would you like a